Could a single ship, lost at sea, truly alter the trajectory of an entire nation's history? In the fading years of the 16th century, Japan stood fractured, a land rent by powerful warlords locked in a relentless struggle for dominion over the archipelago. An intricate web of political intrigue, perpetually shifting alliances and burning personal ambitions, inexorably propelled the country toward a climactic confrontation that would ultimately determine its very future. It was amidst this dangerously tense and volatile landscape that a foreign sailor, battered and broken by a brutal voyage, finally washed ashore on the Japanese coast. What might have seemed, at first glance, to be merely a tragic maritime accident would soon prove to be an unforeseen, yet pivotal, element in a monumental power struggle destined to forever transform Japan. But before we dive deeper into this fascinating narrative, please take a moment to subscribe to the Past Chronicle. After that, we'd love for you to leave a comment below and share what other captivating stories you're eager to explore. All right, brave samurai, sharpen your sword and let us ride into battle. Japan's fate was far from predetermined. There was a long period when the country was little more than a vast battlefield, a realm where control over power could change hands with the ephemeral swiftness of cherry blossoms scattering in the spring breeze. For many decades, the Japanese archipelago had been consumed by an incessant tide of conflict. Powerful regional lords, known as daimyo, held sway over expansive territories, each commanding their own formidable armies of samurai, fortified castles, and unwavering political aspirations. Alliances were forged and shattered with disconcerting ease. A solemn pledge uttered one day could transform into a bitter betrayal the next. This tumultuous era of struggle was far more than a mere succession of isolated skirmishes. It was an underlying, relentless pursuit of something infinitely grander, the unification of Japan. For generations, the nation had remained fragmented, divided into a myriad of rival domains. While some influential clans pursued expansion through sheer military might, others favored the subtle arts of diplomacy, strategic marital unions, or intricate political manipulation. Yet, beneath their diverse approaches, all shared a singular, profound ambition: to emerge as the supreme authority of the entire archipelago. By the close of the 16th century, however, the delicate balance of power began to unmistakably shift. After decades of devastating warfare, a new breed of leaders started to distinguish themselves from the fray. These were men of exceptional caliber, capable of seamlessly blending brilliant military strategy with an extraordinary depth of political acumen. Among them were astute figures who grasped a fundamental truth: genuine victory extended far beyond merely winning battles. It meant seizing control of the country's very future. Concurrently, Japan was also starting to experience the tangible influence of a much larger global arena. Since the preceding century, European traders had steadily begun to reach its distant shores. Portuguese, Spanish, and subsequently Dutch vessels appeared on the horizon. Colossal ships that, to Japanese eyes, must have seemed to sail in from an entirely different universe. They brought with them exotic, unfamiliar goods, groundbreaking new technologies, potent firearms, and a dramatically different religious doctrine: Christianity. For some forward-thinking Japanese leaders, these arriving foreigners presented an enticing opportunity. For others, they were perceived as an inherent threat. The Europeans, after all, brought more than just commerce. They also imported novel ideas, fierce religious rivalries, and expansionist imperial ambitions that had already irrevocably reshaped other corners of the world. However, Japan was no facile land to conquer or easily manipulate. It was a profoundly structured civilization, governed by intricate codes of honor, rigid social hierarchies, and a complex political culture meticulously refined over centuries. And precisely in the midst of this intricate landscape, teeming with intrigue, precarious alliances, and deadly rivalries, an unforeseen event was about to unfold. In the pivotal year 1600, a foreign ship suddenly materialized off the Japanese coast. Its emaciated crew spoke no Japanese, and they could barely comprehend their bewildering new surroundings. They had endured cataclysmic storms, gnawing hunger, debilitating disease, and a brutal, soul-crushing journey across the vast, unforgiving oceans of the world. Yet, their unexpected arrival would trigger consequences that no one, at that moment, could possibly have foreseen. For that chance encounter between the insular world of Japan and a lone, foreign sailor was destined to intertwine with one of the most critical power struggles in Japanese history. This was a monumental conflict poised to decide who would ultimately govern the country for over 2 centuries. On this grand political chessboard, fraught with intricate conspiracies, massive armies, and boundless ambitions, every single move was drawing Japan closer to an inevitable, defining moment, a battle that would forever alter its destiny. The ocean can be an unyielding, relentless adversary. For countless months, that solitary ship had traversed violent, tumultuous storms, navigated uncharted seas, and sailed through waters where precious few Europeans had ever ventured before. Many valiant men had perished along the arduous route. Others succumbed slowly to illness, their bodies weakened by starvation, the ravages of scurvy, and sheer, debilitating exhaustion. When the silhouette of land finally appeared on the distant horizon, the surviving crew members barely possessed the strength remaining to celebrate. But this was no ordinary patch of land anywhere in the world. It was Japan. To European mariners of that era, the Japanese archipelago remained almost an impenetrable mystery. They had gleaned fragmented tales from Portuguese traders who spoke of a civilization that was incredibly rich, meticulously organized, and undeniably powerful. It was a land where disciplined warriors adhered to a stringent code of honor, where formidable lords presided over imposing castles, and where laws were so inflexible that even foreign visitors were expected to obey them without question. When the ship eventually limped its way to the coast, the emaciated survivors were not met with welcoming curiosity or benevolent aid. Instead, they were immediately captured. The Japanese scrutinizing these men were filled with a profound suspicion. Their attire was utterly bizarre, their weaponry strikingly unfamiliar, and their language utterly incomprehensible. To many of the local inhabitants, these bedraggled sailors truly seemed to have arrived from another world entirely. And yet, one among them soon began to command particular attention. He was an English naval pilot, a man hardened by years of navigating treacherous routes and surviving under the most extreme and unforgiving conditions. He possessed invaluable expertise in understanding ocean currents, advanced navigation techniques, and the intricacies of international trade. This unique breadth of knowledge at that critical moment was extraordinarily valuable. That remarkable man was inspired by a very real historical figure, William Adams. Born in England, Adams had embarked on a daring commercial expedition, its grand objective to forge new trade routes between the distant continents of Europe and Asia. His ambitious goal was to reach lucrative, faraway markets, establish vital commercial contacts, and directly challenge the powerful Iberian empires that then dominated a vast expanse of the world's maritime routes. But fate, in its unpredictable wisdom, carried him to a place far more remote and impactful than he could have ever conceived. Upon his arrival in Japan, Adams's immediate situation was precarious and uncertain. He faced the very real possibility of execution, imprisonment, or simply being summarily expelled. Foreigners were not always welcomed, and the burgeoning European presence was already entangled in a complex web of political and religious tensions. However, something truly unexpected occurred. Instead of being treated merely as a captive, Adams began to be meticulously questioned by Japanese authorities who were keenly interested in understanding his identity and his origins. Most importantly, they wanted the wealth of knowledge he carried with him. The Japanese leaders were eager to learn everything they could about the Europeans, their advanced weaponry, their impressive ships, and the myriad rivalries that existed among them. At that precise time, Europe was awash in a maelstrom of religious and political conflicts. Catholics and Protestants were locked in bitter struggles for influence, while powerful empires competed fiercely for territories and merchants sought to monopolize new trade routes. All of this intelligence was profoundly fascinating and potentially strategic for Japan's discerning leaders. Gradually, the foreign sailor transcended his initial status as a mere prisoner. He evolved into something far more intriguing, a critical source of first-hand knowledge about the mysterious outside world. Yet his ultimate destiny did not hinge solely on his inherent intelligence or his remarkable ability to survive. In Japan, true power was vested in the great warlords. And one particular warlord was observing these developments with an exceptionally keen interest, a man who was rapidly ascending to become the most powerful leader in the entire country. He was a patient, meticulously calculating, and intensely ambitious strategist, a man who perfectly understood that even a seemingly lost foreigner could be transformed into a crucial piece in a far larger and more intricate political game. To truly comprehend the intricate dynamics at play in Japan at that moment, one must envision a country where power was not consolidated in the hands of a single, absolute ruler. Instead, Japan was a complex tapestry of domains, each controlled by powerful territorial lords known as daimyo. Each daimyo governed his lands with the autonomy of a small, independent kingdom. They maintained formidable private armies of loyal samurai, held court within imposing fortified castles, and meticulously managed regional economies centered around agriculture, trade, and the collection of tribute. However, this very decentralized structure simultaneously rendered the political balance extraordinarily fragile. A daimyo who grew too ambitious might boldly attempt to expand his territory. A single miscalculated alliance could ignite a devastating war, and one solitary strategic blunder had the potential to unravel years of carefully accumulated power. For decades, Japan had existed under this ruthless logic of perpetual conflict. Entire clans clashed violently for control of territory, for greater prestige, and for undisputed military supremacy. Some lords managed to dominate vast regions for a time, only for another formidable rival to inevitably emerge and challenge their authority. By the close of the 16th century, however, a profound shift began to occur. After generations of seemingly unending chaos, a new class of leaders emerged, individuals capable of perceiving a much broader strategic picture. These were men whose vision extended beyond the immediate concerns of their own domains, encompassing the audacious possibility of uniting and controlling the entire country. One such visionary leader was Tokugawa Ieyasu. Born into a distinguished samurai family, Ieyasu had dedicated much of his life to mastering the art of survival within an intensely perilous and unpredictable political landscape. From his earliest years, he understood with remarkable clarity that in Japan, ultimate power did not necessarily belong to the strongest or most aggressive warrior. Instead, it belonged to the most patient and astute strategist. For years, he had meticulously observed as other ambitious leaders attempted to unify Japan through aggressive military campaigns. While some achieved significant conquests, their forceful methods inevitably created a multitude of powerful and resentful enemies. Ieyasu, however, deliberately chose a radically different path. Instead of launching impulsive, head-on assaults, he painstakingly cultivated a network of strategic alliances. He methodically strengthened his economic foundations, consolidated his existing territories, and waited with unwavering discipline for the precise, opportune moment to act. While other daimyo expended their resources and manpower battling one another, Ieyasu quietly and systematically expanded his influence. His burgeoning power base was strategically located in a city that, at the time, was little more than a burgeoning settlement, Edo. Over the ensuing centuries, that unassuming place would blossom into one of the most vital and influential cities on the global stage. Today, we know it as Tokyo. But at that specific historical juncture, Edo remained simply the tightly controlled operational center for a leader who was calculating every single move with absolute precision. Ieyasu knew, with chilling certainty, that Japan was hurtling toward a critical breaking point. The great clans were deeply divided, their alliances notoriously unstable, and the recent death of a previous leader had left a dangerous power vacuum. This void would soon unleash a decisive and all-encompassing struggle. Every daimyo across the land sensed it. The country was inexorably moving toward an inevitable confrontation, a war that would be unlike any they had experienced before. This time, the objective was not merely to conquer new territories. It was about definitively deciding who would possess the legitimate right to rule all of Japan. And when that monumental conflict finally erupted, it would draw tens of thousands of warriors to one of the largest confrontations the Japanese archipelago had ever witnessed. It would be a battle so immense in scale and consequence that its outcome alone would determine the political destiny of the nation for more than 2 centuries. But even before that earth-shattering battle could commence, the intricate political game was destined to become even more complex. For the foreigners who had arrived by sea were also beginning to exert their influence on the delicate balance of power. When the first Europeans initially reached Japan, they did not arrive merely as merchants seeking profit or explorers charting new lands. They brought with them something far more potent than exotic goods or navigational maps. They brought powerful, transformative ideas. Since the mid-16th century, Portuguese ships had progressively begun to appear along the Japanese coast. With them came not only intrepid merchants and adventurous traders, but also fervent Christian missionaries, primarily from the zealous Jesuit order. For many Japanese, these enigmatic foreigners were a source of profound fascination. They introduced previously unknown products, demonstrated advanced navigation techniques, displayed modern firearms, and offered tantalizing glimpses into a vast, uncharted world. However, hand in hand with burgeoning trade also came a new religion. Catholic missionaries were tirelessly dedicated to converting the Japanese populace to Christianity. They diligently learned the local language, meticulously studied regional customs, and ardently preached a faith that, for many, was entirely novel and profoundly foreign. And, perhaps surprisingly, some influential daimyo began to express a genuine interest in this new doctrine. For certain strategically minded Japanese leaders, accommodating the presence of European missionaries and merchants offered significant political and economic advantages. Portuguese traders controlled crucial commercial routes throughout Asia, and establishing positive relations with them meant gaining access to advanced weaponry and cutting-edge technology. Indeed, some powerful lords even went so far as to convert to Christianity themselves. But this period of religious expansion also ignited considerable tensions. For other Japanese leaders, the escalating European influence represented a tangible and growing risk. Widespread religious conversions had the potential to create deep internal divisions among the clans, thereby destabilizing the fragile peace. Furthermore, the fierce rivalries between the European powers themselves were also beginning to manifest within Japan. Portugal and Spain were staunch Catholic nations. England and the Netherlands, conversely, were predominantly Protestant. These same religious conflicts that already sharply divided Europe began to cast their shadows over Asian trade. Dutch merchants, for example, viewed the Portuguese as direct and formidable rivals. Each European power zealously sought to secure exclusive commercial privileges. Each group strenuously attempted to influence Japanese leaders in a manner favorable to their own national interests. Thus, Japan unwittingly became an unexpected stage where complex global rivalries began to intricately intertwine with the country's profound internal struggles. Within this volatile context, the particular foreigner who had recently arrived in the archipelago represented something quite unique and distinct. Unlike many of the Europeans who had arrived before him, he did not hail from the Catholic world that largely dominated the lucrative Asian trade routes. He was a Protestant. This critical distinction meant that he carried invaluable information about the intricate European conflicts and the sophisticated maritime strategies employed by other empires. Crucially, he knew the specific weaknesses of the very powers that currently dominated trade in the region. For Japanese leaders who were strategically interested in balancing foreign influence, this specialized knowledge was exceptionally useful. While missionaries zealously endeavored to expand their faith and merchants relentlessly pursued commercial monopolies, some astute Japanese lords began to observe the unfolding situation from a strategic perspective. Not every leader viewed the Europeans as reliable allies, nor did every leader see them as outright enemies. For certain discerning leaders, foreigners could be skillfully utilized as mere tools within a much larger political game. It was a high-stakes game where every new alliance, every piece of vital information, and every technological advantage could potentially tip the delicate balance of power. As tensions between the Japanese clans continued their inexorable ascent, that precarious equilibrium was about to undergo its ultimate test. The country was drawing ever closer to its decisive moment. A monumental battle that would unite the most powerful armies in Japan and definitively determine who would ultimately rule the archipelago. The profound tensions that had simmered and built for years finally reached their inevitable breaking point. Japan found itself starkly divided between two colossal alliances of clans. On one side stood the lords who pledged their support to Tokugawa, a patient leader who had painstakingly constructed his power through precise political calculation. On the opposing side coalesced a formidable coalition of daimyo who deeply feared the relentless growth of his influence. They were determined to prevent him from seizing ultimate control of the country. The confrontation was, by this point, entirely unavoidable. For months, both formidable sides meticulously mobilized their vast armies, diligently gathered their allies, and exhaustively refined their battle strategies. Samurai from myriad different territories began their march toward a single, destined point on the map. Castles across the land were prepared to withstand potential sieges and attacks. Spies and messengers traversed ceaselessly between rival domains, carrying vital intelligence that could potentially alter the very course of the looming war. Every single decision held immense weight. Every alliance forged or broken could dramatically tip the delicate balance. Finally, the colossal armies converged at a place destined to become one of the most hallowed battlefields in Japanese history, Sekigahara. The terrain itself was inherently strategic, characterized by narrow valleys, commanding hills, and crucial roads connecting key regions of the country. There, shrouded in the dense morning fog, tens of thousands of warriors prepared for a battle that would irrevocably decide Japan's political future. More than 160,000 formidable fighters participated in that earth-shattering confrontation. Never before had such an overwhelming number of armies assembled on Japanese soil. Intricate armor glimmered menacingly in the damp, heavy morning air. Vibrant clan banners snapped and billowed across the sprawling battlefield, each proudly representing a noble house steeped in centuries of history, pride, and deeply entrenched rivalries. When the battle finally commenced, utter chaos swiftly engulfed the entire field. Archers unleashed deadly volleys from the vantage points of the hills. Samurai, with piercing war cries, charged relentlessly with their spears and swords. Entire military units crashed violently into one another as the cacophonous clash of weapons reverberated like thunder through the valleys. But at Sekigahara, victory was not predicated solely on brute strength or numerical superiority. Betrayal, in its most insidious form, also played a profoundly decisive role. Several daimyo, who had initially pledged their allegiance to fight against Tokugawa Ieyasu, began to dramatically switch sides in the very midst of the ferocious battle. Others hesitated, failing to launch their attacks at the most crucial, decisive moment. Ieyasu, with his unparalleled foresight, had spent years meticulously preparing for this very day. He had secretly negotiated, artfully promised lavish rewards, and cunningly planted seeds of doubt and discord among his unsuspecting enemies. When several key clans abruptly changed their allegiance at the critical juncture, the rival coalition began its swift and irreversible collapse. The battlefield rapidly devolved into a scene of inevitable defeat for Tokugawa's opponents. By the close of that brutal day, the outcome was unequivocally clear. Tokugawa Ieyasu had emerged victorious. But the triumph at Sekigahara was far more than simply a military victory. It marked the dawn of something infinitely grander. With his formidable enemies decisively defeated, the path lay wide open for Ieyasu to establish a radical new political order in Japan. This was a sophisticated system designed to finally end decades of internecine wars between clans and to forge a powerful central authority capable of controlling the entirety of the archipelago. However, consolidating such immense power would prove to be anything but simple. Winning a singular battle was one achievement. Governing an entire nation still teeming with former rivals and deep-seated resentments was a far more daunting challenge. Tokugawa Ieyasu now possessed the unprecedented opportunity to unify the country under a cohesive new regime. But the precise type of government he was poised to construct would fundamentally transform Japan in ways no one had ever witnessed before. The victory at Sekigahara did not merely alter the outcome of one war. It irrevocably changed the destiny of Japan itself. Following that pivotal confrontation, Tokugawa Ieyasu ascended to become the undisputed most powerful man in the entire archipelago. His formidable rivals have been decisively defeated, and his loyal allies have been handsomely rewarded. Those clans that still hesitated quickly understood that the political balance had shifted irrevocably and forever. Yet, Ieyasu possessed an essential, profound understanding. Merely winning a battle was insufficient to truly govern a complex nation. The real, monumental challenge was only just beginning. Japan remained a land dominated by powerful territorial lords. The daimyo still controlled vast and influential domains, commanded their own considerable armies of samurai, and harbored deeply ingrained ambitions of their own. If the new paramount leader wished to prevent the country from relapsing into the devastating chaos of civil wars, he absolutely needed to implement a robust political system. This system had to be capable of effectively controlling all those disparate and powerful clans. To achieve this ambitious goal, he strategically turned to a venerable institution already deeply embedded within Japanese tradition, the revered title of Shogun. While the emperor remained the sacred, symbolic figurehead of the country, the true, tangible power had resided firmly in the hands of military leaders who governed in his name. In essence, the emperor embodied historical legitimacy and spiritual authority, but the shogun wielded the actual political and military power. In the year 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu formally and officially received that esteemed title. With that momentous act, the Tokugawa shogunate was officially born. From its strategically chosen center of power in the burgeoning city of Edo, the new government embarked on an ambitious program to reorganize Japan with remarkable precision. Ieyasu acutely understood that the precarious balance between the powerful clans had to be maintained under constant, vigilant control. To effectively prevent any future rebellions, he established a meticulously designed and tightly controlled political system. The daimyo would be permitted to retain their ancestral territories, but they were now compelled to demonstrate absolute, unwavering loyalty to the shogun. Their movements would be closely monitored, their alliances would be strictly regulated, and each clan would be seamlessly integrated into a rigid political hierarchy. Ultimate authority invariably rested with the central government. One of the most ingenious and effective measures implemented was the requirement for territorial lords to spend extended periods of time in Edo, the capital of the shogunate. Crucially, while they resided there, their families were required to remain in the city as an ironclad guarantee of their unwavering loyalty. It was an exceptionally elegant yet devastatingly effective, method to control potential rebellions. No daimyo could dare challenge the shogun without placing his own beloved family in grave, immediate peril. Concurrently, the new regime systematically began to reinforce the existing social order. Japanese society was meticulously organized into a rigid, stratified structure in which each social group, samurai, peasants, artisans, and merchants, had a clearly defined place. The country thus entered an unprecedented era of profound political stability that would endure for more than 2 centuries. But that hard-won stability, as is often the case, came at a significant price. The Tokugawa shogunate began to progressively and increasingly limit foreign influence. Japanese authorities had analyzed the disruptive role that Europeans had played in exacerbating the country's existing political tensions. Over time, Japan would formally adopt a groundbreaking policy that would fundamentally redefine its relationship with the outside world, a policy of carefully controlled isolation. For generations to come, the archipelago would severely restrict nearly all contact with foreign powers. Only highly specific and meticulously supervised commercial exchanges were permitted to take place. For many Japanese, this decisive policy was viewed as a crucial measure to safeguard the country's newly established stability. For others, however, it would mark the beginning of a prolonged and profound period of self-imposed isolation from the dynamic currents of the rest of the world. Nonetheless, at that precise moment, one undeniable truth was clear. After centuries of relentless wars between feuding clans, Japan had at last forged a new, enduring order, an order meticulously built upon the decisive victory at Sekigahara. It was an order that promised to maintain peace, yet would also exert an ironclad control. When millions of captivated viewers around the globe immerse themselves in the epic story of Shogun, they often feel as though they are peering directly through a historical window. They witness imposing castles, encounter disciplined samurai, unravel intricate political intrigue, and follow the journey of a bewildered foreigner trapped amidst a completely unfamiliar world. But, as with many compelling historical works, the beloved series masterfully interweaves elements of reality with creative fiction. The narrative is undeniably inspired by real events, actual historical figures, and momentous occasions that genuinely reshaped Japan's destiny. However, James Clavell, the brilliant author of the original novel, consciously chose to exercise certain creative liberties. His intent was to craft a narrative that would be both more dramatic and more readily accessible to a broad Western audience. One of the most striking examples of this creative adaptation is the protagonist himself. In the fictionalized story, the English pilot John Blackthorne is vividly portrayed as the intrepid foreigner who arrives in Japan and becomes embroiled in the nation's complex political struggles. This compelling character, however, is directly inspired by a true historical figure, William Adams. Adams was an English navigator who genuinely arrived in Japan in the momentous year 1600 as an integral part of a Dutch commercial expedition. His ship had miraculously survived an utterly brutal voyage across the vast ocean, tragically losing much of its crew along the perilous way. Upon reaching the Japanese archipelago, Adams was interrogated by local authorities and eventually came into direct contact with one of the most powerful men in the entire country, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Over time, Adams skillfully managed to earn the profound trust of the influential Japanese leader. This was largely thanks to his unparalleled knowledge of navigation, advanced shipbuilding techniques, and the intricacies of international trade. His unique experience proved to be exceptionally valuable for a country that was just beginning to cautiously engage with the burgeoning European powers. Eventually, something truly extraordinary transpired. William Adams was not merely tolerated. He was granted the esteemed status of a samurai. He stands as one of the very few foreigners in history ever to achieve such an exalted rank within the highly stratified Japanese society. He received generous land grants, considerable privileges, and a new Japanese name, Miura Onjin, which translates roughly to the pilot of Miura. He also married a Japanese woman and fathered children in the country. Poignantly, his family in England never saw him again. Adams ultimately passed away in Japan many years later, having spent the remainder of his remarkable life in the land that had originally been intended as nothing more than an unexpected stop along a distant trade route. But Shogun does far more than simply adapt historical characters. It also adeptly transforms certain historical events, artfully reorganizes political situations, and creates intricate dialogues that never, in fact, actually transpired. Many names were subtly modified, a deliberate choice that afforded the author the creative freedom to construct highly dramatic scenes. He could do this without being rigidly constrained by the exactitudes of historical records. For instance, the formidable leader Toranaga in the story is clearly and compellingly inspired by Tokugawa Ieyasu. However, by altering the name, Clavel gained a narrative license to imagine intimate private conversations and strategic maneuvers that were never actually documented in historical chronicles. This masterful blend of authentic history and captivating fiction is precisely what catapulted Shogun to such immense popularity. It does not aspire to be an exact, dry documentary. Instead, it is a rich narrative that ingeniously uses real events as a foundational bedrock upon which to construct a broader, more profound story about the momentous encounter between two fundamentally different worlds. On one hand, a European world driven by relentless exploration, burgeoning trade, and fierce religious rivalries. On the other, a Japan that, at that pivotal moment, stood on the precipice of consolidating one of the most stable and enduring political systems in its long and storied history. The real story woven into the fabric of Shogun serves as a powerful reminder of a crucial historical truth. Sometimes, the most decisive and transformative moments in history do not unfold exclusively in grand-scale battles or through sweeping imperial decrees. Rather, they can often originate from something far more unexpected and seemingly insignificant. It could be a single ship, lost at sea, arriving on a distant shore that would, in turn, irrevocably change the destiny of everyone involved. The narrative at the heart of Shogun transcends its form as a mere television series or an exciting adventure novel. It offers a profound window into one of the most pivotal and transformative eras in Japanese history. As the 17th century dawned, Japan found itself deeply fractured, rife with fierce clan rivalries and escalating political tensions that threatened to plunge the nation into an interminable cycle of conflict. Yet, from this crucible of chaos, a new order gradually began to emerge. It was forged through an exceptional blend of astute strategy, unwavering patience, and far-sighted political vision. The decisive victory at Sekigahara, coupled with the ascendance of Tokugawa Ieyasu, heralded the dawn of an entirely new epoch. For over 2 centuries that followed, the Tokugawa shogunate meticulously preserved the nation's stability. Under its unwavering rule, Japan blossomed into a meticulously structured society where the hard-won internal peace fostered unprecedented flourishing across the archipelago. Nevertheless, this period was simultaneously defined by a profound era of self-imposed isolation. At a time when European powers were aggressively expanding their empires and the global landscape was increasingly marked by nascent globalization, Japan deliberately embarked on a divergent path. It meticulously safeguarded its newfound stability by severely restricting nearly all contact with the outside world. The narrative woven within Shogun precisely encapsulates this unique and volatile moment, a pivotal crossroads where 2 vastly different civilizations converged. It portrays a time when the arrival of a foreign sailor, the ambition of a formidable Japanese leader, and the fate of an entire nation stood poised on the brink of an unprecedented new chapter. And while the series skillfully interweaves historical reality with compelling fiction, the fundamental essence of its story rings true. Japan genuinely found itself teetering on the precipice of a monumental transformation, a change that would irrevocably shape its destiny for generations to come. We sincerely thank you for watching through to the very end. If you found this video enjoyable and share a passion for this kind of compelling historical content, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you won't miss any of our upcoming videos and can continue to discover even more fascinating stories. We look forward to seeing you in the next one.